The moment I stepped into my new apartment, the air seemed to cling to my skin, thick with the musk of neglect, and something older, something watchful. 2 weeks ago, I hauled my life, packed into a single suitcase, into this cramped, one-bedroom rental, a refuge from the jagged edges of a breakup that left me hollow. The place was cheap, the walls yellowed by years of cigarette smoke, the floorboards scuffed and uneven, but it had a bed, a sagging mattress that promised rest, and that was all I needed. Or so I thought. That first night, as I lay in the dark, the silence wasn't just quiet. It was alive, pulsing with a presence I couldn't see. My chest tightened, my skin prickling, as if 1,000 unseen eyes were tracing my every breath. I told myself it was the stress, the weight of starting over in a stranger's space. But the room felt wrong, like it was waiting for me to notice its secrets. The apartment was a relic, its corners heavy with shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. The bedside lamp barely pierced the gloom, its weak glow swallowed by the darkness pooling around the furniture. I tried to sleep, but my eyes kept darting to the edges of the room, to the mirror across from the bed, its surface dull and speckled with age. Something was there, not in the room, but in the air itself, a weight that pressed against my mind, urging me to stay awake. My heart thudded each beat louder in the suffocating quiet. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, my fingers trembling, and tried to focus on the hum of distant traffic outside. But the feeling grew a crawling sensation up my spine, like the moment before a storm when the sky holds its breath. I sat up, fumbling for the lamp, and flooded the room with light. Nothing. Just the chair, the dresser, the mirror, reflecting my own pale, haunted face. I forced a laugh, the sound brittle in the stillness, and told myself I was losing it. But the air remained heavy, charged with an unspoken threat that lingered long after I closed my eyes. The next night, the unease turned into something sharper, more insistent. A voice inside me, not mine, but something deeper, whispered to look under the bed. It wasn't a thought I could shake, no matter how absurd it seemed. I'm not a child, not someone who checks for monsters in the dark. But the urge was a physical thing, a claw tightening around my chest, pulling my gaze to the edge of the mattress. My hands shook as I leaned over my breath, shallow, the room so silent I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The floor beneath was bare, just a thin layer of dust and a forgotten sock curled in the shadows. Relief surged through me, and I started to pull back, ready to mock my own fear. But then my eyes caught the mirror, its surface catching the faint glow of the street lamp outside. And there it was, a face not mine, staring from beneath the bed. Pale, almost translucent, its skin stretched tight over sharp bones, its eyes hollow and unblinking, fixed on me with a terrible intensity. My heart lurched, a scream trapped in my throat. I scrambled back, nearly tumbling off the bed, and lunged for the light switch. The room blazed with light, but it was empty. My hands trembled as I grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows as I checked every corner. Under the bed, nothing but dust. Inside the closet, just my sparse collection of clothes. Behind the curtains, only the window and the empty street below. I tore the apartment apart, my pulse a deafening roar, but found no trace of that face. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed, my mind racing. It had to be a trick of the light, a hallucination born of sleepless nights and frayed nerves. But the mirror stood there silent and mocking its surface, daring me to look again. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The room felt alive, its walls closing in the air, thick with something that knew I had seen it. I sat up until dawn, my back pressed against the headboard, watching the shadows for any sign of movement. The mirror remained empty, but its presence loomed a gateway to something I couldn't understand. The nights that followed were a descent into dread. Every evening, as the sun sank and the room darkened, the presence returned heavier, more oppressive. I'd lie in bed, the blankets pulled tight, feeling it, a weight that settled over me like a shroud. My eyes would drift to the edge of the bed, drawn by an unspoken command I couldn't resist. And every time I'd see it in the mirror, that pale face, its hollow eyes boring into me from beneath the bed, its gaze unyielding, eternal. It never moved, never blinked, just watched, with a patience that felt like a threat. The room seemed to shrink around it, the walls pressing closer, the air growing stale and warm. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator, anything but the mirror. But its gaze was a physical thing, a pressure against my skin, a voice in my mind urging me to look. I'd curl up, my breath ragged, praying for morning. I told a friend about it, my voice shaking as I described the face, its stillness, its eyes. She laughed, said I needed sleep, maybe a doctor. I wanted to believe her, to chalk it up to exhaustion. But the face was too real, its presence etched into every shadow, every corner of the apartment. I started avoiding the mirror, draping a sheet over it during the day. But at night, the sheet would slip, and I'd catch glimpses of that glassy surface taunting me with its secrets. I stopped looking under the bed, too afraid of what I'd find or what I wouldn't. I thought if I ignored it, it would fade like a nightmare that dissolves in the light. I was wrong. Last night, the nightmare became real. I lay in bed, the room swallowed by darkness, my body rigid with fear. I didn't look under the bed. I couldn't. My heart pounded, each beat a hammer against my ribs. Around 2:17 a.m., the mattress dipped slow and deliberate, as if someone were climbing onto it. The air grew thick, warm, pressing against my skin like a living thing. My breath caught, trapped in my chest. I didn't move, didn't dare open my eyes. Then a breath, hot, damp, brushed the back of my neck, so close I could feel its rhythm. A voice followed, low and guttural, each word a blade sinking into my soul. You stopped looking. Now I'm here. I bolted upright, my scream silent, and swung at the empty air. The room was still, the bed untouched. I fumbled for the lamp, my hands shaking so badly, I knocked it to the floor. Light flooded the room, revealing nothing, no one. I checked the closet, the bathroom under the bed. Just dust and shadows. But the mirror showed no reflection of the bed, only the floor beneath it, and there in the glass was that face. Its skin was paler now, its eyes darker, its lips curled into a faint, mocking smile. And then its eyes flickered a slow, deliberate blink that burned itself into my mind. I stumbled back, my legs buckling, and collapsed onto the floor, staring at the mirror until the first rays of dawn crept through the window. The face was gone, but its presence lingered a weight that clung to the air, to my skin, to my thoughts. I haven't slept since. The apartment feels smaller, now the walls alive with a presence that watches, waits. I don't look under the bed anymore. I don't need to. It's not under there anymore. It's closer. Its breath warm against my skin. Its voice a whisper in my mind. Every night I feel it, the dip in the mattress, the heat of its gaze, the words that echo in the dark. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's not leaving. And neither can I. The mirror stands uncovered now, its surface glinting in the dim light, a window to something I can never escape. I see it in every reflection, every shadow, every moment I close my eyes. It's here, and it's waiting. It was the kind of morning that clawed at your bones, the sky bruised with clouds that refused to break. 2 years ago, my husband and I had fled the city's clamor for a quiet farm in Appalachia, chasing a life simpler, softer. The air in November was sharp, slicing through my jacket as we pulled into the gravel lot of Tractor Supply. The store squatted low, its faded sign creaking in the wind, promising propane tanks and flannel shirts. We needed a tank for our stove, our fireplace, anything to keep the creeping cold at bay. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sterile glow over stacks of feed bags and tools. My husband, ever practical, was already comparing tank sizes, his voice a steady hum against the quiet store. I nodded, half listening, my eyes drifting to the other customers, an old man in overalls, a woman with a cart full of chicken wire. Normal. Safe. But then I felt it a prickle at the base of my skull, like a finger tracing my spine. Someone was watching me. I turned, scanning the aisles, but saw nothing out of place. Just the usual small-town faces, weathered and familiar. My husband nudged me, pointing at a 100-pound tank. "This one's cheaper," he said. I forced a smile, shaking off the unease. It was just the cold, I told myself, the gloom of the season sinking into my nerves. But as we moved toward the checkout, the feeling grew heavier, like a shadow pooling at my feet. I glanced over my shoulder again, and that's when I saw him. A man, late 50s, standing by a rack of women's flannel shirts. His clothes were too clean, his boots too polished for a place like this. His eyes, dark and unblinking, were locked on us. He wasn't browsing. He was waiting. He moved closer, his steps deliberate, and my stomach twisted. I gripped my husband's arm, my voice low. "Let's hurry." The man stopped at the clothing rack, his fingers brushing a red flannel shirt, but his gaze never left us. I could feel it, heavy as a hand on my shoulder, pinning me in place. The store felt smaller now, the air thicker, as if the walls were closing in. My husband, oblivious, was still talking about propane prices. I wanted to scream to tell him to look, but the man's stare held me silent. A predator sizing up prey. What did he want? The question burned in my chest, unanswered, as we reached the checkout line. The line moved slowly. The clerk, a kid barely out of high school, fumbling with the register. My husband was still debating tank sizes, his voice a distant murmur. I stood close to him, my hands stuffed in my pockets, trying to shrink into myself. The man was behind us now, too close, his presence, a weight pressing against my back. I could smell him, cologne, sharp and synthetic, mixed with something earthier, like damp soil. He was right there. I didn't dare turn, but I felt his breath warm and steady, grazing the nape of my neck. My skin crawled, every nerve screaming to run. But my feet stayed rooted, trapped by the normalcy of the moment. I forced myself to move, stepping forward to nudge my husband. "Let's just pick one and go," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. He glanced at me, frowning, but nodded. The man shifted closer, his boots scuffing the floor. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there, his eyes boring into me. Smile. Act normal. I turned slightly, offering a polite nod, hoping it would break the tension, make him back off. "Good morning," I said, my voice thin. He didn't smile back. His face was angular, his beard neatly trimmed, but his eyes were wrong too. Still like a doll's. "Cold out there, isn't it?" he said, his voice smooth, almost syrupy. He didn't wait for a reply, stepping even closer, his breath now a hot pulse against my skin. He's too close. My heart hammered, but I forced a nod, turning back to the register. The clerk was explaining tank prices, his voice a nervous stutter. My husband answered calm as ever, while I stood frozen, the man's presence, a noose tightening around me. Then he spoke again, unprompted, his words sliding into the conversation like a blade. "You folks new around here?" The question was innocent enough, but his tone wasn't. It was hungry, probing, like he was peeling back layers to see what lay beneath. I didn't answer, but my husband, ever polite, said, "Just moved in last month." The man's lips curled, not quite a smile. "Nice place, Appalachia. Quiet. Safe." The word safe hung in the air, heavy with something unspoken. He knows where we live. The thought hit me like a slap, irrational but unshakable. The clerk rang up our purchase, his hands shaking slightly. I wanted to grab the receipt and run, but the man wasn't done. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know I've got a 100-pound tank at my place, barely used. I'd let you have it for free." His eyes flicked between me and my husband, lingering on me too long. "He's testing us." My husband shook his head, polite but firm. "Thanks, but we're good with this one." The man's face didn't change, but his voice grew insistent. A salesman pushing a deal. "It's just 20 minutes from here. I've got another 40-gallon one, too. You could save a trip." My husband declined again, his tone sharper now. The man didn't back off. "Gotta do it now, though. I'm leaving town in 2 hours. Got to pick up my great-aunt from the airport." His words were rehearsed too smooth, like a story he'd told before. He's lying. The realization settled in my gut, cold and heavy. I clutched the receipt, my knuckles white, and forced a smile. No thanks, we're set. My voice was steady, but inside I was unraveling. The man's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He turned abruptly, hanging the flannel shirt back on the rack with a sharp jerk, then stormed toward the exit. The clerk, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood. "Crazy old guy, huh?" he said, forcing a laugh. I didn't laugh back. My eyes followed the man as he pushed through the glass doors, his silhouette swallowed by the gray morning. We stepped outside to the propane fill-up area, the air biting at my face. My husband was quiet now, his jaw tight. I wanted to tell him everything. The breath, the stare, the way the man's voice made my skin crawl, but the words wouldn't come. Then I saw it, an old pickup truck, late 90s, its bed cluttered with tarps, barrels, and boxes. The man was behind the wheel, his eyes locked on us again. He didn't leave. My heart lurched as he pulled into a parking spot nearby the truck's engine, idling like a low growl. He stepped out of the truck, his movements slow, deliberate. The lot was nearly empty, just us and the propane employee, a burly guy in a tractor supply vest. The man ignored him, his focus on us. "You should really think about a second tank," he said, his voice carrying across the gravel. "Save you a trip. Lasts longer." I shook my head, my throat tight. "We're good," I managed. He didn't stop. "If you don't want to leave your truck, one of you can ride with me. Other can meet us at my place." His eyes were on me now, only me, and I felt it again. That prickle, that shadow pooling at my feet. He wants me to go with him. The thought was a scream in my head, drowning out everything else. My husband stepped in front of me, his voice low. We said no. The man's smile was gone now, his face hard. "Come on," he said, his voice syrupy again, but laced with something darker. "It's a small town. Safe. I'd never hurt a lovely young couple like you." The words were wrong, twisted like a promise laced with poison. "He's not safe." My body screamed it, every instinct urging me to run. The propane employee emerged from the fill-up area, his face set. "Hey, buddy, get out of here. Stop bothering them." His voice was firm, a lifeline in the fog of fear. The man froze his eyes, flicking to the employee, then back to us. For a moment, I thought he'd argue, but he just nodded, a slow, deliberate motion, and climbed back into his truck. The engine roared, and he pulled away, the truck disappearing around a bend. I noticed it, then no license plate, just a blank space where one should have been. We didn't speak as we loaded the tank into our truck. The employee, still shaken, broke the silence. "That guy's bad news," he said, his voice low. "Comes around every winter, always when it's quiet. Only talks to young couples. Creepy as hell." My stomach dropped. He's done this before. The employee's words echoed in my head as we drove home, the farm's rolling hills, no longer comforting, but vast, isolating. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that truck trailing us, its bed of junk rattling in the wind. That night, I couldn't sleep. The farmhouse was too quiet, the darkness outside too deep. I kept replaying the man's words, his stare, the way his breath felt on my neck. What did he want? The question gnawed at me, unanswered. My husband, sensing my unease, checked the locks twice before bed. But it wasn't enough. I saw the man's face in every shadow, his voice in every creak of the old house. Weeks later, at Tractor Supply, again, the same employee helped us fill our tank. He remembered us, his face grim. "You see that guy again?" he asked. I shook my head, but the fear hadn't left me. "Good," he said. "He's been around. Always the same young couples, wintertime. Cops can't do much. No plates, no name." I knotted my throat tight, and we left quickly, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. He's still out there. Somewhere in the hills in the gray November cold, he's watching, waiting for the next couple to cross his path. And every time I step outside, I feel it, that prickle, that shadow pooling at my feet. 6 years ago, when I was 16, I stood in the shadow of Juno Jet Castle, its jagged spires clawing at a moonless Polish sky. The air was thick, not just with the chill of May, but with something else. Something that pressed against my chest, whispering that I shouldn't be here. I didn't know then that I'd spend the night frozen in a bed, clutching my friend, both of us too terrified to breathe, certain that a presence in the room was watching us, waiting for us to look. My mother had arranged this overnight stay through her family's connections in Warsaw, a rare chance to sleep within the walls of a 14th century fortress. She hadn't told me or my friend about the castle's reputation, perhaps to spare us the fear, perhaps because she didn't believe the stories herself. To us, it was just an adventure, a chance to feel the weight of history in a place few could access. The castle loomed over the countryside, its stone walls blackened by centuries' windows like hollow eyes staring down. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and old wood. Our room, tucked in a tower, had a single bed pushed against a stone wall, a dresser by the door, and a narrow window, letting in slivers of starlight. It felt like stepping into a story, but not the kind with a happy ending. We spent the evening laughing, sprawled on the bed, watching movies on my laptop to drown out the oppressive silence of the castle. The walls seemed to swallow sound, leaving only the faint hum of the laptop and our own voices. Around midnight, though, something shifted. The air grew heavier, like a wet blanket settling over us. My skin prickled, not from cold, but from a sudden, unshakable certainty that we weren't alone. I glanced at my friend, and her eyes were wide, fixed on the screen, but her hands were trembling. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a presence, thick and suffocating, like the room had grown smaller, the walls closing in. This wasn't imagination. This was real. The sensation wasn't vague or fleeting. It was sharp, like a blade pressed against the back of my neck. My heart thudded, each beat loud in my ears, urging me to look around to find the source. But another instinct, deeper and older, screamed at me to stay still, to keep my eyes on the laptop's glow. My friend shifted closer, her shoulder brushing mine, and I could feel her shaking. We didn't need to say it. We both knew something was in the room with us. Not a sound, not a shadow, but a weight, a force that seemed to lean over us, watching, waiting. I wanted to laugh it off, to call it nerves, but the air was too thick, the silence too heavy. It felt like the castle itself was holding its breath. I don't know how long we sat there, pretending to watch the movie, our eyes darting to the edges of the screen. The laptop's light cast faint shadows on the stone walls, but they weren't the kind that moved naturally. They seemed to linger, to stretch, as if the light itself was afraid to touch certain corners. My friend's voice broke the silence, low and unsteady. "There's something behind the dresser." She pointed to the far side of the room, near the door, where the dresser stood against the wall. I didn't want to look, but my eyes betrayed me, drawn to the spot. The space behind the dresser was dark, too dark. Like the shadows, there were thicker, heavier than they should be. My stomach twisted, and I felt it again, that certainty that something was staring back. It wasn't just watching. It was angry. The thought came unbidden, sharp and clear, like a voice, not my own. My friend grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You feel it, too, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. We were both seeing it, not with our eyes, but with something deeper, a shared instinct that painted the image in our minds. A girl, young, with golden hair, that seemed to glow faintly in the dark, her presence radiating sorrow and rage. She wasn't standing there in any physical sense, but we knew exactly where she was, behind the dresser, her energy pressing against us, daring us to acknowledge her. Her face, if she had one, was hidden, but the weight of her gaze was unbearable, like needles piercing my skin. We didn't move. We couldn't. The bed felt like a raft in a stormy sea, the only safe place in a room that was no longer ours. My friend's breathing was shallow, her grip on my arm tightening until it hurt. I wanted to call out to my parents, sleeping in the master bedroom next door, but my voice was trapped, my body frozen. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your teeth ache. The laptop's screen flickered just for a moment, and in that split second, I swore I saw her reflection, not on the screen, but in the air itself, a faint shimmer of gold and shadow. My friend gasped, her body jerking against mine, and I knew she'd seen it too. She doesn't want us here. The realization hit like a wave, drowning out everything else. This wasn't just a ghost story. This was a violation, a trespass into a place where we were not welcome. The girl's presence wasn't passive. She was active, deliberate, her energy coiling around us like a snake. I could feel her anger, her pain, her refusal to let us rest. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but there was no logic here, only fear. My friend whispered my name, her voice trembling, and I realized we were both crying, tears streaming down our faces without us noticing. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing closer, the air so thick it was hard to breathe. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in that room. We clung to each other, our bodies pressed together, the laptop long forgotten. The presence never left, never weakened. It was as if the girl was waiting, testing us, daring us to move, to look at her directly. I don't know how we survived those hours, but at some point, exhaustion or fear overwhelmed us, and everything went black. Not sleep, not fainting, but a void, a gap in memory, where the world simply ceased to exist. When I opened my eyes, dawn was breaking, pale light seeping through the window. The room was still, the air lighter, but the weight of the night lingered heavy on my chest. We didn't speak as we packed our bags, our movements frantic, desperate to leave. My friend's face was pale, her eyes red, and I knew mine looked the same. We didn't need to discuss it. We both knew what we'd felt, what we'd seen. When we met my parents downstairs, I blurted out the story, my voice shaking. My mother's face tightened, and she admitted what she'd kept from us. Juno Jet Castle was infamous, tied to a legend of a young woman murdered centuries ago, her body thrown into the castle's well, or some said, killed in other ways. Her spirit, the stories claimed, never left, guarding something or seeking something. Her presence, a warning to intruders. That was her, the girl we felt. The truth sank in cold and heavy as we drove away from the castle, its silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror. My friend and I never spoke of that night again, not because we doubted it, but because saying it aloud felt like inviting her back. My parents slept soundly that night, untouched by the presence, though my mother mentioned a portrait in their room that seemed to watch them. I've searched for answers since scouring books and forums for details about Juno Jet, but the stories are vague, the records sparse. All I know is what we felt, two of us sharing the same vision, the same fear in a room that didn't belong to us. She's still there, in that castle, waiting. I can't shake the feeling that she saw us, knew us, and let us go. But I wonder what would have happened if we'd looked behind the dresser, if we'd met her gaze. Would we have left that castle at all? The thought follows me a shadow. I can't outrun a reminder that some places aren't meant for the living. My heart stopped the moment I realized I was alone with only the crunch of gravel under my boots and the distant howl of wind through the skeletal trees of Roanoke, Virginia. 9 minutes. That's all it took for my quiet walk with my dog to unravel into a nightmare. I can't shake a memory that claws at me every time I close my eyes. The air was heavy that Sunday morning, thick with the damp chill of late autumn. Roanoke isn't a place you'd call welcoming. Its narrow roads twist through forgotten corners of Virginia, lined with crumbling houses and shuttered shops. I'd walked these paths before, always, with my dog, a scrappy terrier named Milo, trotting at my side. Men had approached me in the past, their voices syrupy with offers of rides to the city or someplace safe. It happened maybe twice a month enough to make me wary, but not enough to keep me indoors. I was used to brushing them off my polite smile, a shield my steps quickening just enough to signal I wasn't interested. But that day, something was different. The silence of the town felt predatory, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. I pulled my jacket tighter. Milo's leash looped loosely in my hand. The road stretched ahead, gray and desolate, flanked by overgrown fields and sagging fences. No cars, no people. Just me, Milo, and the weight of eyes I couldn't see. I shook off the thought, blaming the eerie quiet on the fact that it was Sunday, when even the gas station locked its doors. My boots scuffed the gravel, the rhythm steadying me, but then I heard it, a low hum, like an engine idling just out of sight. I turned, squinting down the road. Nothing. Milo's ears perked his small body, tensing, but he didn't bark. Not yet. 30 seconds later, the first man appeared. He leaned out the window of a rusted sedan, his smile too wide, his eyes too fixed. "Hey, darlin'," he called, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Need a lift? Ain't safe out here for a girl like you." My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile, shaking my head. "No thanks. I'm good." He lingered his car, creeping forward to match my pace, tires crunching slowly. I gripped Milo's leash tighter, my pulse hammering in my throat. Finally, he shrugged, muttered something under his breath, and drove off, the sedan vanishing around a bend. I exhaled my breath, clouding in the cold air, but the relief was fleeting. 2 minutes later, it happened again. A pickup truck. This time, its paint chipped its driver older, his gray beard stained with tobacco. He didn't speak, just waved from the window, his hand lingering in the air, like a signal. I ignored him, quickening my steps, Milo trotting faster to keep up. The truck rolled past, slow, deliberate, and I caught the glint of his eyes in the side mirror, watching me. My skin prickled, the hairs on my neck standing on end. What was wrong with this place today? I glanced around, hoping for a sign of life, a shop, a house with lights on anything. But the few buildings I passed were boarded up, their windows, dark, their porches sagging under years of neglect. Sunday in Roanoke was a ghost town, and I was its only occupant. Then came the third man. He was different. Young, maybe mid-20s, with sharp features and a disarming smile. His car, a sleek black coupe, didn't belong in a place like this. He pulled up smoothly, his window already down. "Hey," he said, his voice casual, almost friendly. "You sure you're okay out here? I'm heading to town. Could drop you off." His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I hesitated. He didn't seem threatening, not like the others, but something in his gaze, too steady, too knowing, set my nerves on edge. "No thanks," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I'm fine." He nodded, but instead of driving off, he turned his car around, heading back the way he'd come. He'd been following me. The realization hit like a punch, my breath catching as I watched his tail lights disappear. Milo whimpered, nudging my leg, and I knelt to stroke his fur, trying to calm myself as much as him. That's when I saw him, the man who would haunt me. He was a shadow at first, a hunched figure in the distance, standing on the side of the road near a cluster of gnarled trees. His clothes were tattered, his face obscured by a hood, but his presence was unmistakable. A homeless man, I thought, clutching a worn duffel bag. I tightened my grip on Milo's leash and kept walking, my eyes fixed on the ground. Just ignore him. Keep moving. But then he shouted, his voice raw and jagged, slicing through the quiet. "Hey, come here." I froze, my heart lurching. He was looking right at me, his arm raised, pointing. I shook my head, quickening my pace, but he didn't stop. "Come here," he yelled again, his voice louder, angrier. Milo growled a low rumble I'd never heard from him before. I turned and walked faster, my boots pounding the gravel, but the shouting didn't stop. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was moving. He was jogging toward me. His duffel bag swung wildly, his steps uneven but relentless. Panic surged through me, a white-hot wave that drowned out everything else. I scooped Milo into my arms, his small body trembling against my chest, and I ran. The road blurred beneath me, my breaths sharp and ragged. Behind me, the man's footsteps grew louder, faster, the crunch of gravel, a sickening echo of my own. He was gaining on me. I veered off the road, my eyes scanning for anywhere to hide. A house loomed ahead, its paint peeling its windows, boarded its porch, collapsed into a pile of splintered wood. It looked abandoned, forgotten, but it was my only chance. I sprinted toward it, ducking behind the sagging structure, my back pressed against the rough wood. Milo whimpered in my arms, and I clamped a hand over his muzzle, praying he'd stay quiet. My chest heaved, my lungs burning, but I didn't dare move. "Please don't find me." The man's footsteps slowed, then stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. Silence. Then a low mutter, words I couldn't make out, followed by the rustle of his bag. He was close, too close. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. My legs ached, my arms numb from holding Milo. But I stayed frozen, my eyes darting to the shadows around the house. The air felt thicker, now heavy with the scent of damp wood and decay. Was he gone? I couldn't tell. The silence was worse than the shouting, a void that swallowed every sound except the pounding of my heart. I shifted slightly, peering around the corner of the house. The road was empty, the man nowhere in sight. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. I couldn't stay here. I needed to move to find safety. to get out of this cursed place. I set Milo down his leash, still tight in my hand, and started toward the tree line. The forest beyond the house was dense. Its branches tangled its shadows deep. It wasn't safe, but neither was the road. I moved quickly, my steps light, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The trees closed in around me, their gnarled limbs blocking out the sun, casting the world in a sickly green haze. Milo stayed close, his ears pinned back, his body low. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt through me. What if he was still out there? What if he wasn't alone? The memory of the third man, the young one, flashed in my mind. His car, his smile, the way he'd turned around. And the others, the bearded man, the sedan driver. They didn't feel random anymore. What if they were working together? The thought was absurd, paranoid, but it rooted itself in my mind, growing with every step. Rowan Oak was too quiet, too empty. No cameras, no witnesses, no one to hear me scream. If something happened to me here, no one would know. My body could vanish into the woods, my name forgotten, my story untold. I pushed deeper into the forest, my breath steadying as the adrenaline faded. The trees thinned, and I spotted a faint glow in the distance, a gas station, its neon sign flickering weakly. Civilization. Safety. I broke into a run, Milo bounding beside me until I reached the edge of the lot. The station was small, its windows smudged, its pumps rusted, but it was enough. I collapsed against the wall, my legs shaking, my hands trembling as I clutched Milo's leash. The clerk inside glanced at me, his face blank, but I didn't care. I was alive, but the fear didn't leave me. Even now, sitting in my apartment, the curtains drawn, the doors locked, I can't shake the feeling that I escaped something far worse than a chase. The men on the road, the homeless man's shouts, the way the town seemed to watch me, they weren't coincidences. I've walked alone before, in cities, in suburbs, but never have I felt so hunted. Rowan Oak isn't just a place. It's a trap, a hollow where predators roam, waiting for someone like me to make a mistake. And I almost did. I haven't gone back. I don't walk alone anymore. Milo stays close, his eyes darting to the shadows, as if he senses what I do, that something out there is still watching, still waiting. Next time, I might not be so lucky. It wasn't the night that chilled me. It was the emptiness. The kind of emptiness that claws at your senses, where every sound feels like a warning, and every shadow hides a threat. I was 15, standing in the backyard of our weathered Virginia home. the air heavy with the damp rot of autumn leaves. My dog, Rusty, strained against his leash, his nose twitching as he sniffed the grass. I'd let him out for his nightly routine, the back door ajar behind me, casting a feeble glow onto the porch. It was just another night in our quiet, familiar world. But something was wrong. Feel it. That shiver down your spine isn't just the cold. The yard stretched before me, a maze of shadows under the gnarled oak tree, its branches swaying like skeletal fingers. Rusty froze his ears pricked, staring into the far corner where the fence sagged, half swallowed by ivy. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Not the playful bark he gave squirrels, but something primal urgent. I squinted into the dark, my breath hitching as a faint, sour stench hit me. Wet earth mixed with something sharper, like rusted iron. Don't look too long. You might see it. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat, as if my body sensed what my mind refused to acknowledge. I tugged at Rusty's leash, my voice thin against the oppressive silence. Come on, boy. He didn't move. His growl deepened, hackles, rising eyes fixed on that corner. Then, from the house, my brother's scream tore through the night. Get inside. Right now, my sneakers slipped on the slick grass as I stumbled backward, Rusty's leash taut in my hand. His barks erupted, sharp and frantic, aimed at that shadowed corner where the fence met the earth. My brother's voice, raw, trembling, echoed in my head, a sound I'd never heard from him, not even when he'd crashed his bike and bled all over the driveway. Run. Don't stop. Don't look. The open door was a lifeline, its warm light flickering like a dying star, but my legs felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding me back. The night pressed in thick and suffocating, each breath a struggle against the weight of unseen eyes. I glanced toward the fence, expecting a stray animal, a trick of the light. But there was nothing, just darkness, deep and endless. And yet, I felt it. A presence, cold and unyielding, watching me from the void. Inside, I slammed the door, my hands shaking as I wrestled with the lock. Rusty pressed against my legs, still growling his warmth, a fragile anchor in the storm of my fear. My brother stood at the top of the stairs, his face drained of color, eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. What's wrong? I croaked, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer, just pointed to the window overlooking the yard. Look, you have to see it for yourself. My stomach churned as I followed his gaze. The yard was empty, the oak tree swaying gently, its leaves whispering secrets to the wind. But then he spoke, his words a blade of ice. There was someone out there, right behind you. I froze my mind, replaying the moment I'd stood in the yard, oblivious to the danger. The sour smell, Rusty's growls, the silence that wasn't silent. You were never alone. Feel that truth sink in. A memory flickered a story Mom had told us months ago about a neighbor who'd found footprints in their garden, too large to be a child's, leading to their shed. We'd laughed it off, called it a prank. Now I wasn't so sure. The room tilted my grip, tightening on the windowsill as my brother's words burrowed into me. Someone was there, right behind you. He said he'd been watching from his room, waiting for me to bring Rusty in when he saw it. A figure tall and motionless, just beyond the porch light's glow. Not moving, not speaking, just standing, its outline swallowed by the dark. My mind screamed denials, but my body believed him. My skin prickled as if those unseen eyes were still on me, even now, through the glass. They're still watching. You know it. I wanted to call him a liar, to laugh and break the spell, but the fear in his eyes was real, and deep down, so was mine. We woke Mom, her sleepy confusion hardening into resolve as we stammered out the story. She grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, her jaw set, eyes flashing with that fierce protectiveness I'd seen when she'd chased off a bully at my school. "Stay here," she ordered, but we trailed her to the back door, too scared to be alone. Rusty whined, his tail tucked, as Mom eased the door open. The yard was still, the air thick with the promise of rain. Step into the dark. You need to know the truth. My pulse roared in my ears as we stepped onto the porch, the bat gleaming in Mom's hands. Her flashlight swept across the grass, catching the glint of Rusty's tennis ball, half buried in the dirt. Then it hit the shed. The door was wide open, swaying gently, though the wind had died. The shed was a forgotten relic, its warped boards and rusted hinges untouched for years. We never went in there. Too many spiders, too much dust. But now, its open door felt like a wound, a violation of our home's safety. Mom's flashlight trembled as it pierced the shed's interior, revealing stacks of moldy boxes, a tangle of garden tools, and cobwebs that shimmered like ghostly lace. Something's wrong. You feel it in your gut. In the corner, a shadow seemed to shift, or maybe it was just my fear playing tricks. My brother gripped my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "I saw a light in there," he whispered, "when you were outside." His voice cracked, and I remembered another night, weeks ago, when he'd sworn he'd seen a man slip into our yard at dusk. I'd teased him, said he'd watched too many horror movies. But now, standing in the cold, I saw the truth in his eyes. He was right, and you ignored him. Mom called out, her voice sharp but unsteady. Who's there? The silence that answered wasn't empty. It was alive, heavy with hidden breaths, muffled steps. Rusty's ears flattened, and he let out a single piercing bark. Then, from the shed, a faint scrape, metal on wood. My blood froze. I saw it in my mind's eye. A figure crouched in the dark, their eyes glinting, their hands gripping something sharp. A story from last summer flashed through my mind. Our neighbor, old Mr. Callahan, had found a sleeping bag in his shed, along with empty food cans and a knife. He'd called the police, but they'd found no one. We'd all assumed it was a homeless drifter passing through. But what if it wasn't? What if they'd never left? What if they've been watching us all this time? The shed door swayed again, though the air was still. Mom's grip on the bat tightened her knuckles white. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. We edged closer, the flashlight beam shaking now, cutting through the dark like a blade. The sour smell was stronger here, mingling with the damp rot of the shed. Something glinted in the corner, a rusted shovel, its blade streaked with fresh dirt. My brother gasped his breath, ragged. "That wasn't there before," he said. We retreated. Mom's bat still raised her eyes, scanning the shadows. "It's not over. You're still not safe." Back inside, we locked every door, checked every window, and sat in the living room, the bat across Mom's lap. Rusty curled at my feet, his eyes fixed on the back door, as if he could still sense the intruder. My brother kept glancing at the window, his hands trembling. I couldn't shake the image of that figure behind me, their presence a shadow I'd felt but never seen. You'll never feel safe again. Anchor that fear. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap, its walls too thin, its locks too weak. I thought of Mom's story about the footprints, Mr. Callahan's sleeping bag, my brother's glimpse of a man weeks ago. They weren't random. They were warnings. The next morning, we searched the shed in daylight. No footprints, no signs of a break-in. Just the open door and that shovel, its blade still smeared with earth that smelled faintly of decay. We told ourselves it was nothing a prank, a coincidence. But I stopped letting Rusty out alone. Every night, as I lock the back door, I feel it, the weight of eyes in the dark, patient and unyielding. they're still out there, waiting. And you know they'll come back